How many people in power have you heard say either of these sentences? I was wrong, or I don't know.
None. They've always got an answer, don't they? Yeah, no.
Do you know what they say now? Science change.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Rae. Welcome. Today, I have a really special guest with me. They are a person of many talents. They are a rapper. They are a host of a popular podcast. They are incredibly influential on social media, particularly over the last couple of years. But most importantly, they are a world record holder for the women's deadlifting at 238 kilograms. Not sure if it's, been... I guess your throne has been overtaken by someone else, but I'd like to welcome Zuby, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here, Evelyn. I noticed the usage of the they, them pronouns there. That was interesting.
I did that deliberately. I thought I'd lead in and make people think, is this a woman guest or a guy guest? And then I drop the bomb and I say women's deadlifting, and then your face is on the screen of people. I just thought that might be a cool way to introduce you. And that might segue into sort of explaining a little bit about who you are. Like I've sort of said who you are, but I'd love you to explain people who you are, how you kind of got into this space, and maybe a bit of your background, stuff that people might not necessarily know if they just looked you up on the internet.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Zuby. I am an independent rapper, author, host of my podcast, the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. I am also a public speaker, and I do coaching as well. Everything started out for me in terms of all of that with just the music. I released my first album in 2006 when I was still in university. And since then, I have put out 9 music projects in total, 6 albums and 3 EPs, sold tens of thousands of albums completely independently. And then in 2019, had a bunch of posts go viral, started my podcast, wrote my book, and started to expand more into a lot of the other spheres that people now know me in. Lots of people know me for different things. In terms of my background, I was born in the UK to parents who are originally from Nigeria. I think that's quite important. I lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 decades. I went to an international/American school there up until the age of 11. And then I went to boarding school in the UK. So I was back and forth between the 2 countries for many years during my secondary school and university. I studied at Oxford University. I'm a computer science graduate. And yeah, I've got a pretty mixed and confusing background, which is why people hear my voice either when I'm talking or when I'm rapping, and they don't know whether I'm American or I'm British or I'm this or I'm that. So that is a quick, brief version of the story.
I feel like you're the Clark Kent of like the political/music world, because on paper you've gone to Oxford University. You sound like a businessman, like a suit man, but you're like a rapper and like a political commentator and podcaster and a public speaker. So it's like you're like 2 different people in one, which is probably what makes you so unique, and probably why people really appreciate your opinion and perspective on things, because you do have such a incredible history and background. May I ask if music is something you've always sort of pursued and done, or did that come later in your life?
Music came in my time. So I became a music fan when I went to boarding school in my just preteen or early teenage years. I really got into hip hop as a fan, probably around the age of 12 or 13. Prior to that, funnily enough, I wasn't really a big fan of music. I used to play piano, though. I used to play piano probably from the age of around 7. I even used to do recitals and stuff like that where I lived in Saudi Arabia. And then I think I stopped playing piano when I was about 13 or 14, just because I got interested in other stuff. I kind of wish I had kept it going in hindsight. And then I started rapping when I was 18 years old, released my first album when I was 19. And that was when it really hit me that, hey, this is something that I really want to do, and people like it. And I was, selling tickets for shows, and I was selling thousands of copies of my CDs completely off my own back, literally. I used to just go around to different cities with my backpack and sell my CDs to people on the street, and actually sold over 25,000 albums doing that. So that's how I got into music, but I just love it as a way to, I love being able to articulate thoughts in interesting ways and
Mm.
condense things and big ideas into small, witty, bite-sized pieces. To me, I get people like, man, how do you put out so many fire tweets a day? And I'm like, man, it's the same as rapping.
Yeah.
It's the same muscle. It's taking something that other people are thinking, but may not be able to articulate in the way that you can, and then putting it out there in a simple, concise, interesting, and entertaining way of putting it out. I think that stand-up comedians do something quite similar with comedy. And I think the best comedy is taking what other people are thinking or have experienced, but then framing it in a way that most people would not be able to. So that's why I love that. I also love the creative process of just making something out of nothing, right? So I could just be in the shower or sitting in my room or whatever, and I have an idea for a song, or I have an idea for something I want to create, even a piece of merchandise. And I just love that process of taking something that's just an idea in my brain to something that people like and value and use. So anytime I hear someone, I don't know, see someone listening to my music or enjoying it live, or wearing a piece of my merchandise, or reading my book, or posting one of my quotes, or whatever it is, I'm like, wow, that's amazing, because that's just something I thought of, and then I made it a reality. So I love that whole process.
And I love that you have the skill to do that. I just don't. I'm way too analytical to be creative in any sense. So I really appreciate people like yourself. And the next question I wanted to ask you, has your politics affected your music in a negative way or a positive way? Because, like, let's face it, people, I think, like yourself and like myself, we kind of I guess, criticized by that particular industry and the people who are in those industries. And, you are very vocal about your opinions on politics, religion, and I guess, culture. So have you found that has helped your music, or has it been a struggle to kind of work through?
I think it's helped for the most part. The thing is, I don't really think nor care about that.
Yeah.
Right. I just do what I do. I mean, since I started with my music, I've always been praised and criticized for the same things, right? The praises are the same as the criticisms. And this goes way beyond politics. So taking various things, I am a guy who grew up in Saudi Arabia, went to a boarding school, went to Oxford University, did computer science. My dad is a medical doctor. I'm from a decently well-off family, and I'm a rapper. So right off the bat, imagine when I was still in Oxford University and I was putting out music, I had, people were like, whoa, that's cool. That's different. That's unique. And he's also being true to himself. But you also had people like, oh, that's fake. He's not real. He's not from the street. He's not talking like, that gangster talk or that drug talk or whatever. But other people are like, yeah, well, he shouldn't, because that's not his life. Right. So, and then also, I don't swear, which is relatively rare for a human being, let alone a rapper. There's no swearing on in any of my songs. And so you get some people who are like, oh, wow, that's awesome. I love that. I can play it in the car with my parents or with my children. But then other people are like, oh, I don't like it. It's too clean. It's like Will Smith. It's corny. It's like, it's not, they want that street gritty kind of stuff, So it's always been the same. I think it's the same with the political angle or with my beliefs. So it draws some people to me, and other people, it may put them off. But ultimately, I don't view these things as a marketing strategy. It's just like, look, this is who I am. I'm not going to pretend I lived a life that I didn't live. I'm not going to pretend I believe things that I don't believe. I'm not going to just go in the studio and put those headphones on in front of the microphone and I suddenly become a different human being. That would be fake. Like, that would be not keeping it real. That would be very inauthentic. So from day one, I always just decided, you know what? I'm just going to do what I do. Also, I'm totally independent. I run my own label. Everything I've done and put out is under my name. I own all my rights to everything. So no one can control me. There's nobody above me who can be like, oh, you must do this or you must do that. I just do my thing every day and make a great, healthy living off of it, and have been able to inspire and help thousands, if not millions of people around the world at this stage. So the dream is coming to fruition, and it's still very early as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think it's great. You can't be cancelled. As you said, you're running your own business, you're running your own label, which is great because we're living in a world where cancel culture is a new religion. If people don't like opinion or thought, they're like, well, we'll just cut it off. And I think it's really important moving forward, particularly people who do critically think and do think for themselves, to branch out and do things on their own so that they can't be cancelled, because I know for sure there is such a need for clean, good, decent music like yourself. There's a great rapper as well. I'm not sure if you know him, Shai Lin. He's a Christian rapper. He's like a dad of 7 kids. And there was a minister who once said that he is preaching in his raps better than most ministers in a pulpit. And if you listen to some of the things that he's putting into his songs and his music, it's just incredible. And it's so like meaty, and it's exactly what we need to hear. And you're doing the exact same thing. And so the fact that you can't be cancelled is such a positive thing for people like me who would prefer to listen to your music over a lot of the other sort of stuff that's out there in mainstream. So really appreciate it. But moving on from the music, if you don't mind, I might pick your brain a little bit more on the political side of things, because you are very sort of outspoken, especially on Twitter. I think that's where I kind of found you, because, like a lot of your stuff was being shared around. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm thinking, but I can't articulate it as well as this man. And so I really liked what you said. And you actually wrote a thread not long ago, maybe a few days ago. I think it got about 24,000 retweets, and it was 20 points with it. But basically you said the things that you've learned or you've confirmed about humanity during the pandemic. It was so profound, and it's everything that we're thinking and feeling. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of the points out of the 20 that I sort of isolated. And number 7, I'll just read it because I'll butcher it if I try and paraphrase. So number 7, you wrote, most people believe the government acts in the best interest of the people, even many who are vocal critics of the government. And what I wanted to ask you is, have you found that that particular mentality is more prominent in certain countries than others?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you're in Australia right now, so you're one of the top for that. I was gobsmacked by just how much trust and faith people in your country have of their government and the officials. I knew it was high, actually. This is something I actually, for many years, have always thought that in the Anglosphere, the English-speaking world, that Australia, New Zealand, and Canada in particular actually are much more statist mentality than even the UK, let alone the USA, and particular parts of the USA in particular. And this really, really brought that to a head. I mean, I didn't know it was the level it is. When people think of Australians in particular, I think Canadians are known to be overly polite and non-confrontational, just as a general thing. Australians, though, I think, people imagine there's more of that rebellious kind of independent streak, which is why I think so many people around the world are kind of have been looking at it like, wait, what's going on? I thought you guys were over there, boxing kangaroos and fighting sharks and stuff. So, why are you all submitting so hard to these ridiculous policies? So I think it very much varies from country to country. I think there's an element of it just in terms of economic development. I think history is extraordinarily important. And I think that a lot of people don't think about these things deeply. So, for example, if you even compare the history of the UK or Great Britain versus the USA, right? I mean, America was created off the back of rebellion and independence, right? Like, Americans are basically historically rebellious Brits, right? So it shouldn't surprise anybody that the level of distrust of the government is going to be higher overall in the USA, particularly in, say, more southern and Midwestern regions, than it is in the UK or in Canada, because the countries have such different histories. And this goes all the way down to the Constitution and the amendment, things like, take one thing, the Second Amendment, okay? Consider how private citizenship gun ownership, and that being a hardcore God-given right, is viewed in the USA versus the UK versus Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Australians brag about the fact that they gave their guns away, right?
Yeah.
Like they boast about it, which is something that's always blown my mind. Now I'm like, okay, you see what that led to.
Yeah.
But even at this point, even 2 years into this, I'm sure if you polled the majority of Australians, like they wouldn't draw that link. They'd still be, no, we don't want that. Maybe some people would have flipped now, but I still think the majority, that's kind of ingrained in the mentality. It's the same in most of Europe. It's the same in the UK. Whereas in America, Texas, you go to Tennessee, you go to Georgia, Alabama, somewhere like that, Florida, and they're like, if you want my gun, you're going to have to kill me. Right? Like the gun is to protect them. A lot of people don't understand the Second Amendment, that it's actually a defense of government tyranny. It's not specifically about hunting or self-defense. It's meant to be a check against the government ever becoming tyrannical. I think also, if you look at a lot of former communist countries, places where communism was just defeated even within our own lifetime, then they tend to have a more healthy skepticism of it, because it's more fresh in their minds, the fact that the government can go tyrannical, it can go crazy. And so I think there's a little bit more of a distrust there, and people are a bit more aware of this. I think, there's that common saying that hard times, what is it? Good men create good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. And different countries are always in a different stage of this ongoing cycle. And certainly in the modern Western world, especially in the Anglosphere, it's been so good and so comfortable and so easy for so long that I believe the majority of problems that exist in our societies are the result of that. They are problems of excess. They are problems of comfort. They are problems of life being too easy, not too hard. People having too much, not too little. People are dying of obesity. Nobody is dying of starvation, right? I mean, you can look at other countries. The problem is people don't have enough food to eat. You look at the USA, you look at the UK. Whoa, no, people are dying because they're eating too much. It's too excess. Much food. Even some of the mental health issues going on, it's like people are too comfortable. There's not enough struggle. And so as a result, people overreact to the most minor things. People used to be concerned about macroaggressions. Now they're talking about microaggressions. People used to be talking about violence being violence. Now people are talking about words are violence. Oh, I got misgendered. Oh, someone said something a little bit mean. We need to, even this virus itself, our ancestors would be embarrassed about how the world has responded to a virus with an over 99.9% survival rate in the majority of the population. They wouldn't even have noticed this. They wouldn't even have noticed, but people are responding. The response that's been had would have made sense, perhaps logically, if we were talking about something with, let's say a 5, maybe 10% kill rate, right? Then it would make sense. It would make sense. I'm not saying the policies would have helped that much, but the level of hysteria and hype and people freaking out and staying home and running, all of this, it would have made sense if it's like, okay, if you get this thing, there's a 10% chance it's going to kill you. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter how healthy you are. It's just like bang, 10% cure. And it's not even close to that. It's not even close to 1% for the majority of the population. And we know this. We've known this for a year and a half, and still, you've still got millions of people literally afraid to go outside, afraid to be around people, afraid to see faces in public, afraid to do this, afraid to do that. And then you look at places where there's real struggle. You look at a continent like Africa, where there's a lot more poverty, a lot more disease in general, a lot more mortality in general, especially at younger ages. They've largely breezed through this thing. Lowered about 5% vaccination rate, barely any lockdowns and mask mandates and all that hysteria. They've just been living their lives and just getting on with it. And they've even got significantly lower death rates than pretty much any Western country. So it's not even that, they've been hit really hard and they're getting slaughtered. It's just like they just looked at it and like, okay, like let's get on with this. Malaria is worse. Yellow fever, dengue fever, all these other disease, HIV, all these other diseases we've been dealing with for decades are far, far, far worse than this COVID thing. So let's get on with life.
Well, I know, like, as you said, there are far more things that are worse than COVID. In Australia alone, there's 431 Aussies that are admitted to hospital every single day for alcohol-related diseason. That's every single day. And, that's just being overlooked. As you said, obesity and things that come as a result of that. I don't even want to know what the numbers are in that, because that's probably even higher than the alcohol related diseases. But all of these things seem to be swept under the rug, and people are just, living off this fear. And I think, I forget who said it, was one of the presidents of America, but they said freedom is one generation away from extinction. And I do actually believe we're on the cusp of that. And I think you're right. You look at previous generations, our forefathers, it's like, why did they look certain death in the face and say that it's worth the cost to secure our freedoms and our honor and our virtue for the future of our kids? Why are we getting it so wrong? And I think so much of it is to do with the culture that we're manifesting over here. And I think a huge evil of purporting this type of culture is the media and the propaganda and the fear porn that's being driven. And, I think one of the other things in your thread, you mentioned and you predicted how the government and how the media would pit people against each other, particularly vaccinated and unvaccinated. And I guess my question to you is, do you think that they've been successful in doing this?
In many places, yes. In many places, yes. I mean, it's an interesting thing, man. This is such a deep topic. This is something I could probably speak on for hours. So before I get right into that, there's something else that you said which I wanna address, which was the concept of mortality and how people respond to risk in general now. And I think that's a huge factor. I think something that 2020 and up until now has shown was that there are millions, probably hundreds of millions of people in our modern societies who I don't think prior to this time ever really thought deeply about their own mortality, because people are acting as if nobody used to die prior to 2020. So on a global level, like let's bring some stats out here. So according to the official data, I think at this point, we know these numbers are weird because they're counted in all different ways, but I think they're saying about 5 to 5.5 million people over the past 2+ years have died of COVID-19, or let's say COVID-19 related deaths, about somewhere between 5 and 6 million, I believe is the official count globally. In an average year, about 60 million people worldwide die. So in that same time period, you've had 120 million people, often of much younger ages than the average COVID-related death, die of all other things. And people are there screaming, yeah, but 5 million. I'm like, bro, like, you don't even know how many people typically die. In the UK alone, just in the UK, 1,500 people a day die. 1,500. So in the news, they'll be like, oh, 8 COVID deaths today. Oh, 7 deaths. I'm like, 7 out of 1,500, of which the average age of death is over 80. The average age of the person dying with COVID is over 80 years old. People who are in their 80s dying is not new. People in their 90s dying is not new. We've been living with this our entire lives, but it was never advertised and promoted and focused so much on one cause of death. Heart disease deaths, biggest cause of death in the world by a mile, cardiovascular disease, followed by cancer, followed by multiple other things. There's so many other things, even suicide, drug overdoses. Like there are alcohol related stuff. Like there are so many things often avoidable. Someone could say that things like, certain types of strokes or cancers are largely unavoidable as far as we know thus far. But there are a lot of things that are avoidable deaths, which are constantly happening. But I think people just lack this awareness. And I think also on a spiritual level, I think this is a huge difference between modern people, especially in the West, and ancestors. Even if you just go back 50 years ago, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, is people used to be more religious, right?
Mm.
I know people don't like talking about religion because it's not trendy or not everyone believes in it. And so they want to kind of throw this whole thing in the bin, which is like another part of modern arrogance. But I've also noticed throughout this whole thing that people who believe in God have generally been a lot more calm throughout this thing. And I think it's largely because, and I'm speaking generally here, right? I'm just talking about, there's always exceptions, there's always things, but people who tend to believe in God and in an afterlife and the fact that this life we have right here is not everything and we must, prolong it eternally and do absolutely everything we can, right? I think people who have accepted that and truly believe that have a much more healthy and comfortable relationship with mortality. Because of that, this is just a transitory phase. It's not the be all and all. And so death is not looked at as this thing. It's looked at as something that is just, it's unavoidable. It's inevitable. It's coming. It's part of a plan. There's something better potentially on the other side of it. And it actually leads to a more kind of calm and rational and reasonable approach. I think there's also this understanding that human beings cannot play God, right? I tweeted about this the other day. The notion that people even believed that you could stop an airborne coronavirus that is very infectious. We cannot stop the cold. We cannot stop the common flu. We can't stop them. We've never eliminated them, not even close. So how arrogant do you have to be as a nation, as a society, as an individual to think, oh, you know what, we're going to you're in Australia, right? They had the COVID zero, right? Well, we're going to get it to zero. Yeah. I was like, are you people insane? How arrogant are you? Like, you cannot get it to zero. As soon as you open your border, as soon as people come, it's gonna go up. Of course it's going to. You can't stop it. Sure, there are things you can do. You can have treatments. You can have certain mitigation measures. You can, try to protect vulnerable people. But as I often say, a virus is going to virus. You cannot, you can't just stop it dead in its tracks. It's not realistic. I think 2 years later, people are kind of slowly coming around to this idea. Yeah. But to me, it was kind of obvious from the very, very beginning. So I think as modern human beings, it's very important in general, not just this topic, but to be able to balance, let's say, modern science and technology with our religious roots and philosophy and tradition and all of these things. And I think a lot of problems we have stem from these concepts just getting out of whack. You're seeing it happen here. You see it happen in the world of, just like the families, family values, how people treat each other, aspects of the legal system, everything down to our very core being, down to, what is a man, what is a woman, right? Everything is now up for debate, and it's all people's, subjective interpretations and all of this stuff. And it leads to this unmooring of society where reality itself becomes very warped, and it feels like people are living in these alternate realities. And then people are at each other's throats all the time because we're not even operating off what seem to be the same facts, right? Even if we discuss, even if you discuss COVID with people, I'm like, are we talking about the same disease? Right? I talk to certain people, I see what they're saying, and I'm like, what are we talking about the same thing? Because the way you are chatting and responding and the things you're saying are so far removed from, I don't even want to say it's not even my opinion. It's like objective facts. You can look at the data on this, and it's just not aligning. And I think coming back to what you were saying initially is the media has played a huge role in that, because they've never marketed and run a PR campaign and run a propaganda campaign for a virus in the way that they have done for this. I mean, it's had branding, it's got merchandise, it's got whole, multi-billion dollar pound budget to promote all around the world. And this is completely unprecedented.
I think it's the absence of objectivity in debate that's the language of the oppressor. And right now, that's what we're seeing with the media. There is such an absence of that objective discussion. Like you said, statistics, you can talk to different people and they have different statistics and you all have different conclusions. But I think you nailed it on the head. There's been so much common sense available from the beginning, but people are throwing away common sense for a sense of false security that the government are offering. And I think when man claims the authority of God over the world, that's when it becomes tyranny. And I think when the government becomes your parent, they're going to treat you like a child. And when the government becomes your God, you're going to worship their feet, even if they abuse you. And that's kind of the relationship I've seen in Australia. And it's like the media are kind of facilitating this relationship and all of that. But another point that you made in this thread, number 4, was propaganda is just as effective in the modern day as it was 100 years ago. Access to limitless information has not made the average person any wiser. So in other words, I sort of understood what you were saying as people aren't fools for lack of information anymore. So why do you think people are so vulnerable to this propaganda that we're seeing?
So I think it's really important for people to understand that human beings have not changed. We are the same, right? We are exactly the same as the people who existed in 1920, 1820, 1720. Like we're the same. Genetically, we are identical. We have the same flaws. We have the same physiques. We have the same brains, the same bodies. We are the same. We haven't magically evolved in 100 years. The two advantages that we have as modern human beings is we have access to better stuff. We have more technology, and we have the ability to learn from the people who came before us. Those are our only two advantages: better stuff and ability to access history should we wish to. And a lot of people, choose not to. So beyond that, we have all those same flaws. When you read about history and you're seeing these moral panics or the madness of crowds or crazy ideas taking hold, whether it's communism, or it's Nazi Germany, or it's historical genocides, or it's like crazy religious wars or terrorism or whatever, we're the same people. We have the exact same flaws, the same cognitive, deficiencies. We're prone to all the same things. Something that has always worked all throughout history, for example, divide and conquer. From day one, always religious lines, political lines, racial lines, ethnic lines, gender lines, anything. You like this football team, you like that team. Human tribalism is wired within us. Now, tribalism is something that is neutral in itself. It has great benefits. If you think of your connection to your family, your country, your community, maybe people who share some values with you, like that's an element of tribalism. And I'd say that's positive tribalism. You might even be a member of some kind of sports club or music group or whatever. That's an element of tribalism that bonds you to those people. But you can have toxic tribalism, which at its extreme can go all the way to genocide. That's as far as it can go, right? Normally it won't go that far, but it can go to racial tensions or, fights between nationalities or fights between football hooliganism. Oh, you like this team, we like that team, we're going to fight each other. So human beings have this tribal element just wired within us. So it can always be exploited. If you've got a power, whether that's in the media, a politician, a charismatic leader who is able to and willing to exploit those lines and start to stoke that tension. It's why I was able to predict the whole vaccinated versus unvaccinated divide. Because it was so obvious to me that, oh gosh, they're gonna start trying to 20 after the whole George Floyd things, they started stoking the racial tensions again, right? The whole BLM stuff. They started, let's start pitting white people against black people again. We've done that many times before. Let's start doing that one again, right? And then that one ran out of juice, and it's like, oh, we can do this one now. And people fall for it every single time because of that innate tribalism. So, and then there are other, mental things that mental traps people can fall into, things like cognitive dissonance, sunk cost fallacy, the notion that, oh, well, we've been doing this thing and we've invested so much in it, so we should just keep on going and going. Right now, Australia, perfect example of that, sunk cost fallacy. Well, we've been doing this for 2 years, so we'd better keep going. We can't just jettison it all and say, oh, it was for nothing. And also just the pride and ego, the unwillingness to go, you know what, we got something wrong. We made a mistake. Let's U-turn. Let's about face, or, oh, we got some new information. Have you noticed throughout this whole thing, Evelyn, how many people in power have you heard say either of these sentences? I was wrong, or I don't know.
None. They've always got an answer,
happen.
don't they? Yeah, no.
Do you know what they say now? The science changed.
Yeah, that's true.
Nobody is ever wrong anymore. Nobody is ever wrong. Nobody makes a mistake. Nobody gets new information. The science changed. And this level of hubris and arrogance and inability for, and you see this on the kind of common man level as well, just an unwillingness for anyone to go, okay, I was wrong. I was wrong. That my friend who I called a conspiracy theorist, or that person who I thought was crazy, or, okay, we were incorrect. And you can do this across the whole thing. Okay. It's been about a year since the vaccination rollout really started to go.
Yeah.
What was the narrative about the vaccines in January 2021? Stops you from getting it. Stops you getting infected, stops the transmission. You get vaccinated. Joe Biden said this in the USA. I know the CDC director, Rochelle Walensky. You had people like Dr. Fauci. I know the American figures more, but around the world, they said, if you take the shots, you will not get COVID and you will not spread COVID, right? Which is believable because if you're going to call it a vaccine, that's what many vaccines traditionally did in the past. Okay. And then you started getting what they called breakthrough cases. And then have you noticed that they don't even say breakthrough case anymore, because it started happening so frequently. So many people who got the shots got infected. And then the narrative shifted. The goalpost moved. Then it went to, okay, it prevents severe illness and death. Okay. It prevents you getting hospitalized. Okay. And then you started getting a ton of people a few months later getting hospitalized, even after being double vaccinated. And then they say, okay, shift the narrative again. It prevents, right now we are on, it prevents death. Yeah. In less than a year, it's gone from it stops you from getting it to it prevents death. And look, it's okay for people for more information to come out. But the thing is, it's people not wanting to just admit, you've literally got people now saying, oh, no one said it would stop you from getting it. I was like, what? That's a straight up lie. You can see videos, you can hear on tape, people saying, people in authority saying it will stop you from getting it. So, but no one wants to accept, oh, you know what? It's not as effective as we thought it was. Instead, they're even doing crazy things like trying to blame the people who have not taken it for its inefficiency. Yeah. They are trying to, now they're rolling out third shot in Israel. They're trialing the fourth shot now. And they've even said the fourth shot is not particularly effective at stopping people and no one wants to just go, and I understand this, right? Because they're also gatekeeping around what you can say and what you can't say. So, the truth is these shots are not anywhere near as effective as people originally believed. That is the honest truth. It's not me saying that they do completely nothing or that nobody should take them. I'm not saying that, but they are objectively nowhere near as effective as what people thought. If it was, you wouldn't be jabbing people 3 times. I mean, there's places where they're mandating the third shot already, mandating a fourth shot, right?
Over here.
What other vaccine has that existed for? It's never.
No.
It's not a thing. Some people are, oh, well, what about the flu? It's like, well, the flu vaccine is not mandated, firstly, and it's only once a year for people who do take it. So no, there's never been something where you take it every 2 months, every 3 months. That's crazy. But instead of saying the obvious thing, it's point the finger everywhere else, deny all, deny everything. And that's just one example, but this has been happening all throughout with everything. And I just often wish that people could let's just be honest. Can we just have sit down and all have an honest conversation.
That's right.
Right. Like I'm not gonna judge anyone. I'm not gonna attack anyone. I'm not gonna call you stupid. You don't call me a conspiracy theorist. I won't call you. Like, can we just honestly talk about this? I just saw today an article came out in Reuters, the official fact checkers of Twitter, saying that that natural immunity is better at preventing is better than vaccine immunity. Just today.
Oh,
wow. Literally months ago, they had articles saying the opposite. So we've always known, our entire lives, it's been known that natural immunity is generally stronger than vaccine-induced immunity. This doesn't mean no one should do vaccines because they contract a bad disease to get the immunity. But we've known this. People have been saying this for ages, being called conspiracy theorists, science deniers, whatever, for following basic science. And all of a sudden, the mainstream media is now shifting again to get ahead of it. And now they're suddenly like, oh, actually, yeah, all you conspiracy theorists were right. They've been doing this on all these different issues. And it's just mind blowing. Yeah. But I think it's a lack of honesty and a lack of humility is what is prolonging a lot of this madness. And that's at the media level, the science level, the political level, but also the level of just the average citizen on the ground. Nobody wants to admit that they got anything wrong. Nobody wants to admit that, something wasn't exactly what they thought it could be. And that's leading to the madness.
Yeah, well, we've just been told in Australia, in New South Wales, our state premier, he came out like 3 days ago and said the efficacy of the vaccine, having the booster, has gone from every 6 months to now every 3. So in Australia, they're looking at every single year, you having to have, 4 shots. And it's just like, is this going to be, I don't know if you remember that scene from Gladiator, and he puts his arms out. He's like, are you not entertained? I was like, this is like, Aussies, like, is this the moment where you stop, believe? And I'm like, is this at a pathological level where they're actually believing the lies now because they're so entrenched in this? If they admit that they got it wrong, like, where do you go from there? But, back to the division thing, what you were saying. We're so divided over COVID. We're so divided over gender. I mean, they've got climate change now dividing parents from kids. They're using the vaccine to divide families because kids are getting upset at their parents who aren't getting them vaccinated. Well, mum and dad, I can't go hang out with my friends anymore. I can't play my sport. It's just really sad. But my question is, can we solve and bridge this gap in the division in our communities? Do you think it's possible at this point that we can, come back together and say no to this division?
Yes, absolutely. I'm ever the optimist. I'm what I call an optimistic realist. And look, we've touched on a couple historical examples briefly. And this is certainly not, I think we're living in one of the most stupid time periods ever, but we are not living in one of the most divided and hostile time periods ever, right? Not far from it. And humanity has come back from far, far worse things.
That's true.
So I'm optimistic. I do unfortunately think that there is a small percentage of people who this whole thing has broken them. And I don't think their brains literally are functioning properly anymore. I'm not even trying to be mean or facetious here. I mean that very literally. People have been subjected to 700 days of isolation and confusion and mixed messaging and fear. All of that stuff literally changes a person. Just like someone can go to war for 2 years and they come back with PTSD and their brain is literally not wired the same way that it used to be. And I think, unfortunately, that's a small percentage of people. Most people can and will wake up, and the tide is absolutely turning. I don't know if you saw yesterday, Boris Johnson just announced in England, all the restrictions are being dropped next week. Yes. All of them, everything.
That's good news.
That is good news, right? And that's not the first and it's not the last. You've seen several states in the USA, all the Republican states really dropped all their stuff about 10 to 12 months ago. And so it's going, the tide is turning. People are waking up far more slowly than they should be. But another part of it is whilst I can understand people being concerned about like what you said, because in the UK, they said the same thing about reducing the time between boosters from 6 months to 3 months. They said the same thing in the UK about 2 months ago. So because I keep an eye on what goes on in the world, you can see what happens in one place and use that to kind of predict what's going to happen elsewhere. But they're playing their hand way too hard. People don't want to take 4 shots a year. Like, sure, again, there's going to be a small minority of people who are willing to take 100 jabs for this same thing over their lifetime. Most people are not. Even most people who have taken 2 or even 3, if you push them to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, let's just think about this. Okay, if they were going to do that, then by say December this year, people would be on what, their 8th jab, seventh or 8th. People don't want to do that. People don't want to live like that. People don't want to be in the year is 2023 and you and your kids cannot go to the cinema or to a concert because you declined your 11th jab.
Yeah.
People are not going to, even the most tolerant, even the most like pro-government, pro-vaccine, like whatever, fully into this people are going to be like, this is a bit much, right? Like, when you're getting called an anti-vaxxer because you only took 9 jabs, right?
Yeah.
Like when they start seeing that affecting them, it's going to turn the tide, even just the numbers, because the number of so-called unvaccinated people is going to just keep going up. It's going to keep going up and up and up. I'm getting a lot of people like, man, Zuby, like, how do you maintain hope? I'm like, dude, it's just math. The numbers are on our side. Like, people are not going to go along with this. A lot of people let's be real. A lot of people took the first 2 jabs because they thought that was the way out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Maybe they themselves, sure, there's people who are at risk and they really, wanted them and they were anticipating it and excited about it. They're 70 years old. They haven't had COVID. They've got some comorbidities. Yes, I want it. And then there were a lot of people, especially younger people, who were not at risk, but they were told, look, it stops transmission. This is the way out. We can return to normal once we get, X% of people jabbed up. And then they shift the goalpost out again, and they shift it out again, and they mandate this and they push that. And each time they do that, less the take up goes down, right? It's why they're even just getting so aggressive now and forceful and trying to lock people in their houses and discriminate against people and segregate people and all that. While that is scary, and I understand if you're living in an area where they're doing that, it would be scary, particularly to someone who does not want to take these shots. Also, to me, that's kind of a sign of hope because it's a sign of desperation, right? They tried the carrot. Now they're just trying to beat people with a stick into submission. The narrative is crumbling. People don't want to be getting injected every 3 months for a virus with a 99.9% survival rate that in many cases they've already had now, or everyone's getting COVID. Everyone's getting this Omicron thing, right? So
we have to Megatron now. I don't even know what strain we're up to.
I love the fact that they skipped G. Did you notice that?
I know. We don't want to be, offensive to China. We have to skip that one.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
It's all crumbling. As I'm saying, even in the mainstream media, you're starting to see them start to admit natural immunity and talk about the devastation caused by the lockdowns. And the whole narrative is shifting. So I think it's less than a year until this entire thing collapses. And
maybe it would just take.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, maybe it's just going to take people growing like a 6th toe or something for them to say, I won't get the 11th shot. Maybe that's what it's going to take. But I agree with you. I think stupidity can't sustain itself. Doug Wilson is a great minister, and he always says that. Exactly what you said. We've been through worse before, like we're going to go through worse again. Stupidity can't sustain itself. It's going to implode. It literally can't continue the way that it's going. I'm more of a pessimist than you, Zuby, if I'm honest. I think it's my background. I've seen so much evil in the world in my 12 years of law enforcement that I kind of look for the worst. But lately, I am starting to try and deliberately think more positive. And I like to remind myself that we've obviously always lived amongst this many idiots. We've just never been tested until now. And it's a great leveling. And I think there's going to be a new era of people kind of moving forward out of this, which I'm super encouraged by, and I think it's really got a lot of people to look at their own health as well through all this, which is positive. Like myself, I'm like, I might take a probiotic today. I might start, eating a little bit more healthy, getting a little bit more fit. And I'm already pretty fit and eat pretty well already, but it's even getting me to kind of look at things and look at growing my own food and having healthy, vegetables from my own backyard, as opposed to all of this mass farming that we get, and who knows what chemicals they spray on it, pesticides, and you name it. So I think it is good for health, but it's probably a good segue, I guess, sort of tying in our interview. You're really into fitness.
Sorry to jump in. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you been in Australia this whole time?
I have.
The past 2 years? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a big reason for your pessimism.
Probably, yeah.
Because this is something I've noticed, because depending on where people are and what they're surrounded by and have been for the past 700 days, literally, it tends to influence that, because we tend to project what's around us as kind of like the norm. So I genuinely believe that I think most people in Australia do not know how normal much of the world is and has been, because they have not left. Like, people have been stuck.
We're not allowed to.
Place. Yeah, exactly. But then people think like, oh, like I hear people, I chat to some of my fans in these places, and they say things like, oh, well, where can I go, Zuby? Everywhere is the same. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, what are you talking about? Everywhere is the same. It's like, that's not even close to being true, right? Not even close. I'm somewhere right now, no restrictions at all. You can go to the nightclub, you can go party, you can go eat in a restaurant, like whatever. You don't need to wear a mask indoors. Everything's fine, right? Even in England, England is fine. There's lots of places that are totally fine, but I think that leads to pessimism when people are just kind of stuck in one place. So I just wanted to bring that up, as I think what if you go to like Texas or something and go spend like 2 weeks in Texas or Florida or Mexico or Turkey, even like just somewhere that's like normal, you'll very quickly be like, oh, actually, things are
not as bad.
Yeah.
As I said before we started recording, I need to hire a coyote and somehow get off this prison island and just live. I just feel like I just need to live. So if anybody watching this has connections to coyotes in Australia, hit me up on Signal or Telegram. Let's not on any mainstream social media accounts. The police, if I hear a helicopter, I know someone's given me up. But yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think I am actively trying to be more positive going forward, because sometimes, you've got to go through some pretty rough times, and it teaches you to hold on to things that are eternal, hold on to things that are more than just the next few years. Like I think we have a real, we look really short term as human beings instead of long term. And I think long term, maybe it's good that we're going through all this for our kids' future and, our grandkids' future. But just sort of tying back into health, I did want to touch on you wrote you authored a book on health, and I know it's something you're passionate about. I know that you briefly transitioned to being a woman for a short time, as I introduced you, for your deadlifting, but on more than just a trivial, fun type of thing, you genuinely are quite passionate about health. And I thought maybe you could share a little bit about your book and a little bit about your vision on health and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure thing. So I really started getting into health and fitness in my mid-teen years. I used to play rugby, actually. When I went to boarding school in the UK at age of 11, baseball was actually my main sport I played in when I was in Saudi, but doesn't really exist in England. So I picked up rugby. And when I was in my mid-teens, around 15, I started going to the gym to get in better shape for that and to, bulk up a little, build my muscles, get stronger, all of that. So that's when I really fell in love with weight training, and just, getting stronger, lifting weights and stuff like that. I also was a little bit of a fat kid. Here's a fun fact for you. Here's a fun fact for you, Evelyn. I weighed more 20 years ago than I weigh now.
Really? Wow.
And I'm not a small guy. So
this is one of those I have to see it to believe it.
So I've been through my own fitness journey. Some people see me now and they're like, oh, I wish I had your genetics, or you're lucky, and I'm like, well, I've been through my own journey,
Yeah.
So that's how I really got into physical training, and like most people do, especially if you start that young, lots of trial and error, experimenting with different diets, probably wasting way too much money on nonsense supplements that I didn't need and that don't help.
Pea
Um,
protein.
so I went through this whole journey, and it's just became a key part of my life. And then in terms of writing my book, so I wrote my book, Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody, in 2019, just after things had started to blow up for me after breaking the women's deadlift and things like that. Um, and I wrote it just as a PDF that I thought, okay, this is going to help a couple hundred people. A lot of people are asking me in the real world and online, nutrition advice, training advice, what's your workout, this, that, how do I do this, how do I do that? So I just wrote a concise guide on essentially all the things I wish I knew when I was 15, all the core things that I've learned in terms of mindset and motivation, nutrition, and training itself. So I wrote and released that around mid 2019. As of today, without even being on Amazon, totally independently, it's actually sold over 7,000 copies now in, I think, 65 or so different countries.
Wow,
it's helped
amazing.
a lot of people to lose weight, to build muscle, get fitter, get stronger. So I'm really glad that it's been able to help a lot of people. It's also taught me that I now know I can write books. So it's not going to be the last one. But I think health and fitness is so important. I often tell people we only get one body. We only get one body. And another bizarre thing about the modern world is that a lot of people treat their material possessions better than they treat their own bodies. You know, they treat their shoes, their car, their sofa, their house, their TV with more care than they treat themselves in terms of what are you eating? How much water are you drinking? Are you sleeping, moving, exercising? And it's also weird because these are things that fundamentally everyone knows are good for them. But I think that's why my book starts with mindset, because I think a lot of people, even if you're not a nutrition expert or an exercise expert, everybody knows that it's good to exercise, right? Maybe you don't know the perfect routine or how to perform the perfect squat or whatever, but everyone knows that exercise is good. Also, everyone generally knows which foods are good for you and bad for you. They might not know all the ins and outs of nutrition, but everyone knows, okay, you know, an apple is, you know, generally better for you than a cheeseburger. We all know that, but people still make these bad decisions. Everyone knows that smoking is bad for you. There's no one out, even smokers, they all know that, but people continue to do it. And I don't think we've ever totally been able to hack why human beings do so many things that we know are not good for us. And maybe that's a whole interesting book that someone potentially could write themselves. But I think, health is so important. It's so core and fundamental to everything we do. This whole conversation we've had, this time that we're living in, which is supposedly about health, should highlight for everybody just how important it is. Yes, we don't live forever. We are all mortal. Life has 100% mortality rate. But for the time that we are here, let's live it to the max. Let's have energy. Let's be healthy. Let's live as long as we can and as healthily as we can for ourselves, for our children, for our families, for our communities, all of that. And as you know, as being someone who's in shape and in good health, it's a benefit to every aspect of your life. You have more energy, you have more physical ability, literally, to like just do things, whether that is lifting objects or running to places or doing this or doing that. You're just a more capable human being. And also you feel better. We live in this age where people talk a lot about mental health, but people rarely connect. Mental health and physical health are very connected. They're not exactly one and the same thing, but they are very connected. And if you are in a very poor physical state, then it's hard to be totally mentally healthy. For an obvious example of this, just think about when you do get sick, right? When you do feel sick and you are stuck in bed or stuck in the house, how is your mental health? It's not great. Like, you're not really feeling on top of the world, right? And so it's obvious and intuitive that these things are connected, but like with many things, people disassociate them and silo them. And so when people talk about mental health, it's rare to hear someone talk about physical health at the same time. But I think if we really want to raise ourselves individually and as a community and even as nations, then it's in our best interest for people to be, it's in our interest for people to be healthy. And so whatever we can do to control the aspects of that we can, because as we've discussed, there's many elements we cannot control and it's just random. We should at least try to control what we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've picked your brain for far too long. I'm so sorry, but I've really appreciated the insights that you have. They're very profound. What I want to direct people to is, one, your book, where they can get it. And I know you've just recently released an album. Is it called Word of Zuby? And I just guess, can you direct people where they can go to support you, whether they want to purchase your book or your music, and just give us a little bit of an insight into that?
Yeah, sure thing. So the best place for both of those is teamzuby.com. That's Zuby, Z-U-B-Y. Go to teamzuby.com. That's my online store. Got my music there, all my albums. Got my book there, my merchandise. You can find everything there. And if you want to find me on social media, I am at Zuby Music on everything. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Minds, everything.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining me from the penal colony. It sounds like you're in a far better place than myself. If I ever get out of here and escape, I'll definitely, please. But no, I really appreciate your insights. Even though I'm in Australia, it's good hearing perspectives from people outside of Australia who are looking in, because as you said, we get so lost in the state of affairs over here that perspective is often hard. So thank you for that. And I really hope and pray for the best for you in wherever you are. And I really hope people can go and support you and get behind your stuff, because you're producing some amazing things. So thanks again.
Thank you, Evelyn. I appreciate it.